Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. We're going to be discussing imposter syndrome. I'm Jay Harris, Jay Harris on Twitter. I live in the warm desert of Las Vegas, where I have my own software company, Arana Software. And as a part of my job, I'm responsible for finding new clients, for managing projects, for mentoring other developers, and questions about skills always arise. What are you good at? Think about that in your own mind. What are you good at? Come up with a list of things that you are good at. I'm sure you can come up with a list, a generic list of something. Maybe you're good at making shortbread cookies. Maybe you're good at playing Minecraft. Maybe you're good at playing soccer or football or golf. Me, I'm really good at breakfast. I'm pretty good at making pancakes and bacon. Really good bacon. I've sort of turned creating bacon, cooking bacon into an art. But those are simple things. Let's up the ante a little bit. What are you an expert at? Many of us, certainly if you're like me, we might pause at that question. What are you an expert at? Whoa, that self-doubt kicks in. We're sort of afraid of that one word, expert. We're embarrassed almost to admit what we're an expert in. I mean, think about if you were in a job interview and someone asked you, what are you an expert in? It's another step beyond just what are you good at? What are you more than good at? What are you better than average at? What are you an expert at? And we hear that question and we twist it around inside of our heads. We doubt ourselves. We try and justify ourselves. Our brains are certainly jerks to us. Our brains hear, in what are you an expert? And our brains relay back to ourselves, in what world are we an expert in anything? I'm not really an expert in anything. I'm not an expert in anything. In what world could I possibly be an expert? As a part of that self-assessment, we're getting lost on that word. We try and compare ourselves. We try and think of who else we might know that might fit that bill. Who else that we could certainly define as an expert. I can think of a few experts in software development. David Heinemeier Hansen. He's the creator of Ruby on Rails. He's the creator of Basecamp. He's a professional race car driver. He created a framework. He is most certainly an expert in the field of software development. James Gosling. In 1995, he created Java. He's an expert in Java. He should be an expert in Java. He created Java. He created a language. In software development, you create a language that pretty much makes you an expert, right? Anders Heilsberg. One framework and one language. He was responsible or co-creator for Turbo Pascal, for Delphi, for C#, for TypeScript. There's a lot that he has his hands in. He is most certainly an expert in software development. So when we hear this, in what are you an expert? And our brains are jerks. And we try and twist this around and we compare ourselves to other people. We think of that self-assessment form on yet another website. Rate your skills in C#. Rate yourself in Ruby on Rails. Are you a beginner? Are you a novice, an intermediate, advanced? Are you an expert? And that's as high as the scale goes. We sort of turn that further on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being an expert, because that's how high up that form goes. How do you rate yourself in software development? On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being an expert, how do you rate yourself in software development? As if expert was the ultimate prize. As if expert is as far as it goes. There is no achievement higher than being an expert. So our brains can't help but replace that top step with some sort of idol, some sort of celebrity, some sort of industry leader. We replace that top step with the best. On a scale of 1 to Anders, How do you rate in software development? Because this is how we think of that term. In what are you an expert? On a scale of 1 to Anders, our imposter syndrome kicks in. That imposter syndrome kicks in and it blocks out all of the logic, all of the reasoning. We can't even properly define what an expert is. So let's start there. How do you define an expert? Well, maybe it's the creator of the things. 1 to 10, 10 being you wrote the framework. You made the thing, you're the author, you're the architect, you're the creator, you're the source. It's all because of you. Like DHH, creator of Ruby on Rails. Without Rails, Ruby isn't as much of a thing. James Gosling, he created Java. Without him, there are no Java developers. It's tough to imagine the .NET framework at all without C#. It's tough to imagine C# without Anders. 3 minds that if you take those minds away, you wipe them off the face of the earth, and entirely industry disappears with it. We're all here, instead of writing Java or Ruby or C#, we're coding everything in Visual Basic, Perl. Created the thing, seems logical. Created the thing, certainly that's a definition of an expert. Like Einstein. Einstein's not a creator. He's a brilliant physicist. He wasn't a creator of the things. He discovered a lot of the elements of physics, but he didn't create the elements of physics. They were already there. He just found them. He's not a creator. Neil deGrasse Tyson, same thing. Brilliant astrophysicist, but he didn't create space. He's an expert in space, but he didn't create space. So this creator idea falls right down. You can certainly be an expert in thing without being the maker of the thing. So let's just go with maybe the greatest. You have to be the greatest of all time. You're the GOAT. You're the greatest of all time in the thing, and that makes you an expert. Certainly DHH and Gosling and Anders and Einstein and Tyson, they're all greats. Joan Jett. I love rock and roll. Put another dime in the jukebox, baby. Greatest guitar player of all time. Or maybe you think the greatest guitar player of all time is Jimi Hendrix. Purple Haze, Voodoo Child, Little Wing. Infamous covers of All Along the Watchtower and Hey Joe. Maybe that's your greatest guitar player of all time. Dave Grohl, former drummer of Nirvana. He's now the guitar player, front man behind the Foo Fighters. Former drummer. One of the greatest drummers of all time. And he doesn't even drum anymore. I couldn't imagine being Taylor Hawkins, the drummer for Foo Fighters, having to sit behind one of the greatest drummers of all time, Dave Grohl, every day. But Dave Grohl's not doing it because he's too busy being a guitar player and singing and being a front man for the Foo Fighters. So that's got to be a burden on Taylor Hawkins. Taylor Hawkins, the Hawk, has to be great at drumming just to keep up with this image that is Dave Grohl standing in front of him. But we're talking about guitarists here, and certainly Dave Grohl is one of the greatest guitar players of all time. Greatest of the thing seems like a logical definition for expert. This is Wally Harper. Wally Harper is the sales manager for the Sam Ash Music Store in Orlando, Florida, where he's been there for 16 years. If you walk into the Sam Ash in Orlando, Florida, and ask Wally a question about guitars, Wally is going to know the answer to that question about guitars. He's not Dave Grohl, he's not Jimi Hendrix, he's not Joan Jett, but he's still an expert. You walk in and ask him a question, you're just going to trust his answer because you know that Wally Harper is an expert in guitars. So, greatest of all the things falls down. Let's try more. Experience. Certainly, experienced of the things makes you an expert. Extensive, personal, first-hand experience doing the thing. Gosling and Anders and Einstein and Tyson and Joan Jett and Wally Harper. Wally Harper's been playing the guitar for well over 20 years. Lots of first-hand experience in a guitar and how it works and how to play it. Everything about the guitar. Wally Harper, he's got it. Johnny Bench, catcher for the Cincinnati Reds. Big Red Machine in the 70s. 14-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, 1989 inductee into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. He played 2,158 games, and during that time caught probably somewhere over 300,000 pitches. Lots of personal experience, right? Expert in baseball. Johnny Manel, also a catcher. 2018, he retired as catcher for the Vegas 51s, a minor league team in Las Vegas, Nevada. 993 games as a professional baseball player. Only 35 of those were in the major leagues. So he never really made it to the majors. He's still an expert in baseball. Marco Valenzuela, also a baseball catcher. He's a third-year university student at the University of Nevada in Reno. He's barely old enough to buy a beer in the United States. He doesn't have the years of experience as Johnny Manel or Johnny Bench, but he's certainly an expert in baseball. If I walk up to Marco Valenzuela and ask him a baseball question, I'm going to trust the answer. I'm going to trust that he knows how to play because, well, the University of Nevada at Reno trusts that he knows how to play baseball. Not a tremendous amount of experience, not those years and years and years of experience playing the game. Still an expert. Joe Buck, play-by-play announcer for Fox Sports. He's won Emmys 4 times in the U.S. He was National Sportscaster of the Year. Out of the last 23 years of the Baseball World Series, 21 of them were with him as the play-by-play announcer. He's never played a game of baseball professionally, ever, not once. Still, he knows everything about baseball. Everything about baseball. If a pitcher tosses the ball to the catcher, Joe Buck can identify what it is, whether it's a fastball or a slider or a cutter. He can identify what it is just from the curve of the ball as it whooshes by at 90 miles an hour. He's an expert in baseball, but he doesn't have that firsthand experience of playing himself. So, experienced of the things still falls down. So how do you really define an expert? Well, how do the others define an expert? Edward de Bono, author of the book 6 Thinking Hats, says an expert is someone who has succeeded in making decisions and judgments simpler through knowing what to pay attention to and what to ignore. Knowing what to pay attention to and knowing what to ignore. Oxford Dictionary simplifies it as just a person with comprehensive and authoritative knowledge or skill in a particular area. Authoritative knowledge or skill in a particular area. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being you have authoritative knowledge or skill of the things. How do you rate as an expert? Johnny Bench is in the Hall of Fame. Obviously, he has authoritative skill. Joe Buck, 4-time Sportscaster of the Year and been responsible for calling the play in the World Series 21 of the last 23 seasons. Obviously, authoritative knowledge. Same with Marco. Same with Joan Jett. Same with Wally. You walk into that Sam Ash music store, ask Wally a question, he's going to have authoritative knowledge about the guitar that you're looking to buy. Anders speaks at conferences and user groups. He participates in the community. People go to him with questions and they trust his answer. He has authoritative knowledge and skill. That's what makes him an expert. He rates a 10. Rhonda Bergman, software developer in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She speaks. She helps run user groups. She participates in the community. When her peers ask her questions, they trust her with the answer. Authoritative knowledge or skill. 10 out of 10. Sina Zolkername, another software developer I know. He's in El Segundo, California. He doesn't speak at conferences or user groups. He doesn't run user groups. But still, in his workplace, people ask him a question, they're going to trust the answer, just like he does of his peers. Authoritative knowledge or skill. That makes him an expert. So how do they define an expert? Well, it's the exact same way that you do. Authoritative knowledge or skill of the things. But we struggle with that identity aspect. How can we identify an expert? What makes someone an expert? What makes up authoritative or knowledge or skill? How can we validate that objectively? How can we identify that in others to help identify that in ourselves as well? Well, first of all, it's got to be demonstrable. You've got to be able to show your expertise. Whether that's through your ability to play the guitar, play baseball, code. You got to be recognized by your peers, other guitar players or baseball players or software developers need to be able to trust you, to recognize you. When they ask you a question, they trust the answer that you give back. Recognized by the public. Recognized by people that aren't directly you. Recognized, if you are Johnny Bench, recognized by people that aren't experts in catching a baseball. If you are a guitar player, recognized by people that don't even know how to play the guitar. If you are a software developer, recognized by people that can't even write Hello World. We see that with our employers. People that pay us money, give us their money to do this thing on their behalf. And really they get this prima facie expertise. In other words, it's just on face value. We trust it on face value. Again, let's go back to Wally Harper. You walk into the Sam Ash music store, you're going to trust that he knows what he's doing. You don't even have to really have that demonstrable expertise from Wally. You don't know any of his peers, so you don't know if his peers validate him and trust him and respect him and observe him as an expert. You certainly have that public aspect there. He's there in the store, he's wearing the Sam Ash shirt. Or Wally's just behind the counter if Sam Ash doesn't even have shirts for their employees. He's the person on the other side of the counter you talk to, and you trust that Wally knows a thing or two about guitars. Would you walk into Sam Ash and walk up to Wally and start quizzing him on his guitar knowledge to see if he actually had that expertise? No. You just trust that he has it. He's getting paid by the store. That's going to be good enough. And it's the same thing for you and me. Same thing, same traits, same characteristics, same recognition. One of the things that I do for my community involvement is run an organization called Give Camp. There are many Give Camps. I particularly run the one held in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it's a non-for-profit organization where software developers can get together and build technology, like building websites for local nonprofits in need. If you think of the local animal shelter, the few dollars that the local animal shelter gets in donations, all of that money goes to buying dog food and cat litter, and not for buying a new website. So oftentimes those smaller nonprofits, their website looks like it was created by the neighbor kid next door. Because oftentimes it was created by the neighbor kid next door that's just learning how to create a WordPress website and is happy to do it for free because that's all the animal shelter can afford. He's just learning it. He probably doesn't have that expertise yet. So we have local technologists, professionals that come in and build these technology applications like a new WordPress site for the area's local nonprofits. But oftentimes, when those technologists come to GiveCamp, that same imposter syndrome kicks in. How many of you know WordPress? Or let me rephrase that. How many of you consider yourself an expert in WordPress? No one raised their hand, at least that I could see through the lights. Oh, now think about a moment all of the technologies that you are learning here at NDC Oslo. Let's say earlier today you went to a talk on React. The very first time you ever saw React, you have no exposure to React. I'm pretty confident that everybody in this room, given a day, could create Hello World in React. If you're not a Java developer, but you're still a software developer, still a programmer, I'm confident that in a day you could create Hello World in Java. If you have no experience in .NET, I'm pretty confident you could write a C# application that says Hello World within a day. And the same thing applies to GiveCamp. You might not be an expert, or at least consider yourself an expert in WordPress, but I'm pretty confident that you could spin up a brand new WordPress site from nothing and have no experience to here's WordPress in a day. Such is the same with GiveCamp. It's the same reason why for years I could go over to my grandma's house and yet again after another power outage the clock would just be blinking 12 all the time, and I'd go over to grandma's house and I'd fix her VCR so that it shows the actual time and this stupid thing isn't blinking anymore. I don't even need the instructions. I can figure it out. I've never seen this VCR before in my life, but I could still figure out how to set the clock on the VCR. Or when daylight savings time starts, change the clock in my car to show the right time. And that's many of us. We can figure those things out. That time to Hello World is easy for us. Joe Buck, Marco Valenzuela, Johnny Bench, they're probably not going to be able to spin up Hello World in Java in a day. We could figure that stuff out. But am I really an expert? Does that really it's Hello World. It's Hello World. Hello World doesn't make me an expert just because I can make Hello World in Java. That's nowhere as close to an expert, Jay. Get real. That self-assessment makes it hard for us to put that label on ourselves. We judge ourselves differently. On that scale of 1 to 10, there's a much higher bar for placing ourselves on it than we put our peers on it. Our peers are always way higher on that scale of 1 to 10 than we put ourselves. It's almost like this own negative that we apply to ourselves. And it doesn't matter what the scale is. The 10 doesn't matter. We're not going to put ourselves there. On a scale of 1 to 10, the 10 doesn't matter. We're not going to put ourselves there. It doesn't matter what it is. For me, if I was asked on a scale of 1 to 10, Jay, how good are you at walking? I'm probably going to give myself a 9. Sure, I can walk, but every once in a while I stumble. I might be a little bit awkward. I might be a little bit clumsy, so I'm really a 9. I'm not great all of the time at walking. I'm just a 9. I'm not an expert in walking. I'm just a 9. But I can walk. And Joe Buck can't baseball, but he's an expert in baseball. I'm just a 9. The 10 doesn't matter. The only way that the 10 can matter is if we make the scale ridiculous so that the 10 doesn't matter. Jay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is walking as well as a 4-year-old, okay, fine. I can walk as well as a 4-year-old. I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old at home. I can walk better than both of them, and they're older than 4, so fine. I'm a 10 when the scale doesn't matter because it's just as high as a 4-year-old. Why is that? Modesty. Well, really, ego. There's a lot of elements to that. to that negative aspect that we give ourselves, where I only walk a 9 out of 10. Pride. Pride's part of modesty. There's a lot of religious connotations around pride. So many religions. Pride it's the summit of self-love. Nearly every religion refers to this as some sort of affliction, some sort of evil, some sort of sin, some sort of negative that's right up there with anger and greed. We know that pride's really just ego. It's this negative. We're unable to have any pride in our abilities. I can't be proud of my ability to walk, because pride is viewed as such a negative thing. I can't be proud of I'm awesome at walking, because it's pride. Because it's boasting. Certainly boasting is excessive pride, self-satisfaction, particularly when compared to others. Don't boast. It's not nice. For us at home in the House of Harris, we call that neenering. Boasting is neenering. That's what we tell the 6-year-old and 7-year-old. Don't neener. Like, neener, I can do that thing better than you can, ha. We call it neenering. Don't neener. Don't boast. It's still just ego, right? We view declaration of our expertise, I can do this thing, as boasting. Ha, I can do this thing, and you can't. But that's not how it is. Me saying that I'm an expert isn't saying, and you can't. There's no limit on the number of experts in software development. There's no quota in the world that we're bumping up against, and suddenly if we allow one more person into the expert club, that means someone else has to be booted. You've been kicked off the island. Get out. That's not how it works. Arrogance. The next logical step. This inflated sense of our abilities. Still ego. Are my skills really that good? Am I really that good? No. I don't know if I'm really a 10 at walking. Maybe I'm just more of a 9. I don't want to appear arrogant. You know what? 9 sounds good. We'll just go, it's good. It's not a 10. I don't want to be arrogant. We'll just say that I'm a 9 at walking. I don't want to appear arrogant. I don't want to appear egotistical. Which leads in finally to that imposter syndrome. That backing away, that shirking, that self-deprecating, that, my skills, they're not that good. I'm not a 10 at walking. Because of this reason and that reason, because I tripped over the curb. I didn't see it. It was right there. Any idiot would have seen the curb right there that I just tripped over, and I didn't see it, so obviously I'm dumb. I'm not an expert in walking, because an expert in walking would have seen that curb right there. So I'm not good enough. I don't belong in the room of people that are experts in walking. It's still ego. If we're going to call arrogance a superiority complex, then we have to call imposter syndrome an inferiority complex, and it's still just egos being jerks. One way or another, superiority complex or inferiority complex is still just our egos being jerks to ourselves. But that's what we get. What are you an expert at? Our modesty kicks in. Our ego kicks in. All of that ultimately leads into our imposter syndrome. We make that face. Me, an expert? I'm not an expert. I'm just another programmer. We're embarrassed to admit what we're good at because we were taught not to talk about what we were good at. Don't boast. Don't be arrogant. Don't be prideful in your things. So when all that's left is we don't talk about it because everybody else is as good at it as you are, it leads to that same imposter syndrome. We doubt ourselves because everyone else can do it, right? My skill's not special. Everyone can do it, can't they? I mean, my grandma could have programmed the VCR the same as I'm just saving her 5 minutes. That's all I'm doing. I'm saving her some time. It's not that she couldn't figure out how to program the clock on the VCR. It's just she was too busy doing other things. And I'm just helping grandma out to save her some time. Anybody can do it. Even if they lost the instructions, anybody can do it. I'm not that special. Stephen Jay Gould, he disagrees. An evolutionary scientist. He says any human being is really good at certain things. The problem is that the things you're good at come naturally. And since most people are pretty modest instead of an arrogant SOB like me, his words, what comes naturally, you don't see as a special skill. It's just you. It's what you've always done. The 10 doesn't matter. It's just us. It's what we've always done. We can't help it. That modesty gets in our way. That ego gets in our way. What are you good at? What are you good at? There's certainly some of you that know things that I don't know. You're better at things than I am. You're good at things that I have no experience in whatsoever. Sure, maybe I'm good at making shortbread cookies and you're not because you've never made a shortbread cookie in your life. Maybe you can play tennis. I don't know the first thing about playing tennis. That doesn't necessarily mean you're an expert in tennis, but the question is, what are you good at? So we make that scale, 1 to 10. How do I really define what I'm good at? Well, 10, that's good. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm down here at walking, I'm a 9, because that's really just good minus my ego. Whatever my ego is, that's my 9 is my ego getting in my way, because really, I'm an expert in walking. Not an expert in walking better than a 4-year-old, I'm an expert in walking. I can walk just fine, I don't even think about it anymore. It's completely autonomous. My brain doesn't think left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right. It just does it. It just happens. I'm an expert in walking. But on that scale, with that modesty, now that we add an expert, well, our scale of 1 to 10 was good, and we've already established that I'm not good. I'm a 9 when we're talking about what we're good at, and we need to make room for the expert. So let's slide everything down. Because that's where Anders goes. Anders is an expert. I'm just a little bit less than good because I'm not Anders. Way down there, not an expert at all. The 10, it doesn't matter. We're not going to hit it. No matter what your 10 is, you're not going to put yourself there. Think back to the beginning. Think back to the beginning when we were talking about the list of what you were good at that you made in your head. I was talking about shortbread cookies and golf and pancakes and bacon. What list did you make in your head of what you were good at? Now on that list, did you put your career? Did you put software development? That thing that other people pay you to do because you're good at it. Did you put software development? Did you put whatever your career is on that list? There's something that someone pays you to do on their behalf. But did you even put it on the list of things that you were good at? The 6. How do we get past this thing? Because we didn't even put our career on the list of things that people pay us to do it. We didn't even put it on the list of things that we were good at. Number 1, we have to remember that the 10 doesn't matter. Remember that the 10 doesn't matter because the 10 isn't the goal. The 10 implies that there's nothing beyond it. It's a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is the limit. There's nothing beyond the 10. Obviously, we can't hit a limit or 11 because the scale was just 1 to 10. And that's false. The scale itself doesn't matter. Because first, expert isn't a scale. It's binary. It's a switch. Either you are an expert or you're not an expert. It's like being 18. You can't, on a scale of 1 to 10, how 18 are you? You're either 18 or you're not 18. You're either an expert or you're not an expert. It's not a scale. There's more beyond it. And because it's not the end game, even the comparison to others doesn't matter. On a scale of 1 to 10, how 18 are you? You're not going to think about other 18-year-olds and think, hey, I'm bigger than they are, or I'm faster than they are, or I'm smarter than they are, or I'm more mature than they are. Either you're 18 or you're not. It's a switch, like being an expert. It's a checkpoint. It's like a save point in a video game. I don't know. We were all taught back in school growing up how a square is a rectangle. Rectangle is a quadrilateral where opposite sides have equal lengths. So certainly a square fits that description since all of the sides are equal length and it's still a quadrilateral. A square is a rectangle. But we also know that a rectangle is not necessarily a square. Like derived classes in coding. A cat can derive from a pet. So a cat certainly is a pet, but a pet is not necessarily a cat because a pet could also be a dog or a bird or a turtle. Likewise, Anders is an expert. But an expert is not necessarily Anders. An instance of that expert class isn't necessarily going to be equal to other instances of that expert class, even though they're both instances of the expert class. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being Anders, because he's an expert, we've sort of tried to convince ourselves that that means that the 10 is the expert. But that's not the case. Because though Anders is an expert is not necessarily an Anders. So we have to move that scale way back down because you are an expert too. And if we're going to make the scale of 1 to 10 with 10 being an expert, we have to understand that there's life beyond that scale. The expert is not the limit. There's still learning to do beyond once we've achieved expertise. There's more that we can gain. There's more knowledge to be had, more applications to build, better things, greater things that we can do beyond just when we achieve expert. It's not, yay, expert, done. I don't need to learn anything else. My brain's full. It's a switch. Second, we also need to keep track of that definition. An expert doesn't mean the greatest of all time. It doesn't mean the creator of the things. It doesn't mean the most experienced of the things or even necessarily extensive firsthand experience of the thing. Joe Buck is an expert in baseball even though he has no firsthand experience in the game. Marco doesn't either, even though he's played baseball. Neither one of them created the game. Neither one of them is the greatest ever in the game. They're still certainly both experts. And with that, also remember With that, also remember that the definition of expert doesn't mean that someone's better than you just because they're an expert. It's a switch, like being 18. We hope that there's life beyond 18. We hope that there's life beyond being an expert, but it's just an achievement unlocked inside of that video game. It just means authoritative knowledge or skill. Like so many websites out there. Wikipedia, I don't know, it's not the greatest website of all time. It's not the creator of the knowledge. It's certainly authoritative. And number 3, with celebrating out that expertise, we're already very good at celebrating that expertise when it comes to others. It's easy for us to celebrate I don't know, the achievements of Johnny Bench, and the achievements of Joe Buck, and the achievements of Anders, and the achievements of Einstein and Joan Jett. We can celebrate the achievement in our peers. We can celebrate the achievements in our family members. But we struggle with that when it's celebrating the achievements of ourselves. Think about how proud we were when our siblings or our children graduated from school. I was pretty proud of my son, the 7-year-old, when he graduated from daycare, from preschool. I was proud of him for graduating from preschool. I was far more proud of my son graduating from preschool than I was of myself when I graduated from college. It's not like my son got enough expertise in preschool that he could go have a professional career. Maybe there's some careers out there of being awesome like a 7-year-old at coloring and, I don't know, not pinching your sister. I don't know too many people that are going to pay for that. We need to be able to celebrate ourselves the same way that we celebrate others. Perhaps taking a step back and thinking about, for this same skill, if my peer had it, would I celebrate that expertise? Would I recognize that expertise in someone else? And with that, we can take that ego and maybe make it fade away just a little. We're not going to get rid of it entirely, but we've got to recognize that, try and objectively remove our own egos from the picture. That same negative attribute that took my 10 down to a 9 in walking. So in what are you an expert? I'm an expert in software development. I would imagine that most of you, probably the same. That in no way means that I'm better than you in software development. Not at all. That in no way means that those of you that aren't experts in software development are not ever going to be. You're just not yet. I mean, you're here. You're here at NDC Oslo to learn about new things, to learn about new technologies, to learn about new languages, to learn about new methodologies, to get better. And if you haven't already achieved that expert, you are working towards it. But chances are you probably already have. Because chances are, if you're here, you can probably still figure out Hello World in Java in a day, having never touched Java before. Hello World in React in a day, having never touched React before. That's the stuff that makes us an expert. Being able to identify quickly the things that matter and the things that we can ignore. Because my grandma, or Joe Buck, or Johnny Bench, or Joan Jett, none of them are probably going to be able to create Hello World in Java in a day. But that most important takeaway is remembering that expertise doesn't mean you're the best. It doesn't mean that you're the champion of the world. Think of expert mode on a video game. The experts aren't the ones that beat expert mode on the video game. The experts are the ones that can play expert mode on a video game. Even just the very first level. Because you've beaten the normal campaign. You've beaten normal mode. And now expert mode has been unlocked because you've conquered normal mode. It doesn't mean that you've then beaten expert mode. There's no, hey, let's see if you can beat this one. Then you can really call yourself an expert. No, then you're Anders. He's an expert in language design, in creating new languages and creating new frameworks. I'm not an expert in language design. Not at all. Nor do I really want to be. But we can still both be an expert, and we can still both celebrate that expertise, as can you. Thank you. I hope you're having an excellent time at NDC Oslo.